Welcome to the Resources Overview. My name is Emma and I'm Technical Support at Cartograph. In this session, we will cover an overview of the Resources tab of Cartograph. Resources is a core functionality for Cartograph OMS. Resource management is designed to show how your time and money are being spent. You can track labor, equipment, materials, and vendor information. Resources are entered with the timesheet or the Distribute Resources command. This session follows the Asset Management and Work Management sessions. The core functionality of resources is labor, equipment, materials, and vendors. Labor allows you to track the time spent by people doing the work. Users can be set up with a labor record where you can record their labor rates and assign tasks. Cost information is calculated and stored on the labor record to keep record of the laborer's work and time. Equipment allows you to track the tools used to complete work. You can keep track of details for all your equipment and record the rates for the associated costs of using the equipment. You can also track the work done on the equipment, like oil changes and brake checks, and the costs will be stored as costs related to the equipment. Materials allow you to track the supplies used to complete tasks. Materials can be set up as non-stock, not tracking the inventory in the system, but still tracking usages on tasks and related costs, and as stock items. Stock items allow the system to keep track of inventory on hand, usage of the inventory on tasks, and the costs associated with the materials. As an Enterprise Advanced Feature license for OMS, material locations and material orders are also available. Vendors offer the functionality to track preferred vendors and the materials you purchase from them. Vendor records keep track of cost of material provided by the vendor and the contact information for those vendors. Resource entry takes place on either the task timesheet or using the Distribute Resource tool. Unlimited resource entry is allowed on the task timesheet, but all resources must have valid rates to add entries. Resources are recorded for specific dates on the timesheet, which must be within the task actual start and actual stop dates. Distributing resources allows users to add resources across multiple tasks in one action. After the session, you will understand each resource type, its core functionality, and how resources are used on tasks and work orders, and how to create each record type. Resources is an essential functionality with OMS. By default, all users have access to resources. Permissions to resources are set up in role administration. Users who complete tasks in the system will all need to have a labor record created for them with a labor rate to track costs. Users of all levels can utilize resources, from entering resources on the task timesheet to stocking and managing materials in the system. To start, let's talk about the labor resource. Labor is a resource where the time spent by people is tracked to tasks. Labor costs are all part of the overall costs of tasks and assets. The three important things to remember are, for each labor record to work in the system, it must be tied to a user account and have at least one labor rate. Make sure you include an email address in the record detail so the laborer can receive notifications and task assignments are applied to labor records. Let's go through the process of creating a labor record and labor rates. Here we are on the labor list view with the common labor fields. Let's create a new laborer and give it labor rates. I'll choose the Create button. I'll leave the ID set to auto number. I'll say first name is Roy, last name is Smith. Now there is a user account for R. Smith in this system that I'll want to associate to this labor record. This is required if I want Roy to use an iPad and to see his assigned tasks. Title will be Crew Leader. Department will be set to Public Works. And Supervisor will be set to Lee Jackson. I'll scroll down and fill in the email address for Roy Smith at cartograph.com. We will go ahead and leave the other contact fields blank to populate later. Required fields are marked with a red asterisk, so you can see not many fields are required for the labor record. Under relevant dates, Let's set the hire date to today. I'll go ahead and say finish and save. Now we're looking at Roy's labor detail view. Here in the details section, we can see basic information we just entered for the laborer. The assigned tasks section will show this laborer's tasks which have been associated, so as of now the section is empty. Let's scroll down and focus on rates to enter in the laborer's standard and overtime rates. I'll go ahead and choose add. I'll select standard by default. I'll set the rate to be $25 an hour, effective today. These are the basic fields required for creating a labor rate. The default in this system is the standard rate, which we have to set a dollar amount for. The effective on date is required, so we'll set that as today. The expires on date is not required, so we will leave it open. Let's finish and save and repeat this process to create an overtime rate as well. Add. I'll change the rate name to overtime. I'll set the rate to be $37.50, effective today, and finish and save. Here in the labor detail view, we see a section called logs, which is blank for our new laborer. Logs are where the system stores the resource entries for this user's tasks. Let's look at labor ID 3161 to see what populated logs look like. I'm going to search for labor 3161 and choose that laborer. I'll scroll down to the logs section. Here we can see the logs for this laborer. We can see the list of tasks that the laborer has done work on. We can see the date they did the work, what the task ID was, the hours and the costs. We can also see the rate name and the activity. Looking at the header, I can also see a photo of the laborer, the contact information, and the recent tasks for this laborer. I can also see the count of open assigned tasks and the cost of the last 30 days. Let's go back to our laborer, Roy Smith, and upload a photo for him and assign a task to him. I'm going to search for Roy Smith and go back to his record. I'm going to scroll down to the attachments section and hit edit and upload. I have a photo on my desktop which I will use and say open. And automatically this photo is set as the primary attachment, which I could turn off by checking that red paperclip, but I do want to leave it on so that the photo shows up in the laborer's thumbnail. I'm going to go ahead and say done. I'm going to go back out to the work tab and I will add an all tasks layer. I'm going to go ahead and choose a planned task and I'll view that. I'm going to go ahead and click on actions and edit task assignments. I'm going to search for Roy Smith and add him as an assigned labor and save. Now I'll click back on the resources tab and I'll be able to view Roy's labor record, and I can scroll up to assigned tasks and see the tasks which are assigned to Roy now. I'm going to open one of the tasks which Roy is assigned to, task ID 691, and I'm going to enter resources. We'll say add assignments. I'll remove Jennifer Smith and I'll enter 4 hours for Roy. I'll save changes. Now I've entered Roy 4 hours on this task with his standard rate name. I'm going to go ahead and close. I'll click on the resources again. Now I'm back on Roy's labor record. I can see that he has 2 assigned open tasks. I can see under recent tasks the task 691, which we just edited, and the 4 hours that we just added. We've now completed our labor overview. We learned how to create laborers, associate labor records with user accounts, add labor rates, create task assignments, and enter resources for labor. Next, we will look at equipment. To look at equipment, we'll go out to the list view and I'll select the drop-down for labor and choose equipment. And now I'm looking at an equipment list view. Equipment is a resource used by tasks. Trucks, earth-moving equipment, snowplow blades, and lawnmowers are all examples of equipment which can be tracked with OMS. All equipment which is used on tasks must have a valid rate so costs can be calculated. Equipment use and rates are tracked as either mileage or hours. Equipment can also have work done on it like an asset. Tasks like oil changes and brake checks are displayed on the equipment record, and the costs are rolled up in the equipment cost. Let's create an equipment record and look at the equipment detail view. Here you can see the equipment list view with common equipment fields. Let's create a new equipment record, give it rates, and look at the equipment detail view. I'm going to select Create. The ID is marked as required, but by default is set to auto number, so I'll leave the ID field blank. I'm going to set the manufacturer to Chevrolet. I'll set the model to Silverado, the year to 2018, and I'll set the equipment classification as heavy-duty vehicle. The meter type will automatically populate based on the equipment classification I choose. The equipment classification library in Library Manager is where the classifications and meter types get set up. Next, we will populate the baseline meter with the odometer of the equipment when we acquired the equipment. I'll set that to 100. I'll set the purchase cost to be $20,000. I'll set the purchase and in-service dates to today. I'll set the warranty begin date and warranty end date to today. Note that all of these fields are not marked required other than the ID. I'm going to go ahead and finish and save. We're now viewing the equipment detail view for the equipment we just made. We can see the equipment classification, manufacturer, model, and purchase date in the header. We can also see various cost sections in the header for vendor, fuel, labor, parts cost, as well as total cost. As we put data on the equipment, those values will populate. Let's jump to an existing equipment record to see the data in action. I'll search for equipment C9001. Here on equipment C9001, we can see the header populated with data. We can see the total cost of the equipment is $475, which adds up the vendor cost, fuel cost, labor cost, and parts costs, which have been used on this equipment. We can also see the current miles, which reflects the current odometer reading on the equipment. We can see the equipment usage cost, which is the cost of the equipment usage log added up, and finally the VRR, which is the vehicle replacement rating. Scrolling down, we can see the various details stored in the details section of the layout. Then we see rates. Rates are the cost to use the equipment for task. Let's go ahead and add an overtime rate for this equipment. I'll go ahead and choose Add. I'll change the rate name to Overtime, set the rate to $41.25 per hour, set the effective on to 7/13/2015, and I'll leave the expires on blank. I'll go ahead and finish and save. Now we've created an overtime rate, so we can log this equipment on task with its overtime rate. If we scroll down, we see tasks on the equipment layout. Equipment is the only resource which will have a task section in the default layout because tasks get done on the equipment, like oil changes and inspections. For this equipment, we can see there's one task. One is a preventative maintenance plan. We can create tasks on the equipment by using the Create Task button in the header. Let's create an equipment maintenance task for this piece of equipment. I'll go ahead and select Create Task. I'll set the activity to be equipment maintenance. I'll leave the start and stop date as today, and we will assign this task to our laborer, Roy Smith. I'll go ahead and choose Next, and then finish and save. Now we can see the new task is listed on the equipment record. Below tasks, we have the usage log, which is the record of where the equipment was used as a resource on tasks. Here you can see the date, task ID, activity, rate name, usage, and cost. Below that, we see the fuel log. The fuel log allows the system to store information each time fuel is purchased for the equipment record. We record the date, fuel type, odometer, quantity, and unit cost. let's create a new fuel log to see how the current miles in the header is affected. I'll go ahead and choose Add. I'll set the date to today, the fuel type to be unleaded. I'll set the odometer to be 6,800, the quantity to 20, and the unit cost to 2.62. I'll go ahead and finish and save. Now that we've added a fuel log, we can see that the current miles has increased to include the odometer reading we just filled in with the fuel log. As we continue to scroll through the equipment details screen, we see the system is calculating the current miles per gallon, current cost per mile, average miles per gallon, and average cost per mile based on fuel logs. Next, we see the Vehicle Replacement Rating, or VRR section. The VRR is a calculation which considers the age, usage, maintenance, and repair costs, reliability, type of service, and condition to calculate a rating. The VRR functionality requires an OMS Advanced extension. Below VRR, we can see the list of inspections, if any, for this equipment. Next, we can view the replacement parts for this equipment. This section can be used as a reference to list the parts commonly used on the equipment for easy access when doing tasks against the equipment. Finally, we have the history and the attached files sections. The next section of resources that we'll cover is materials. So I'll go out to the resources list view and view a materials list view. Materials are the supplies used to do tasks in your organization. As you enter the materials used on a task, the cost is calculated and quantity on hand is adjusted. There are two types of materials, stock and non-stock. Stock materials are those which are kept on hand. Stocking a material will allow Cartograph to keep track of how much is left. For example, if you purchase 10 signposts and use 4 of them, Cartograph will know there are still 6 in stock. It's important to remember that you must have stock on hand in order to use a stocked material on a task. If there is no stock on hand, you will need to stock some in before you can use it. Reasons to create a stock material are if you need to know what quantity is on hand at all times, and if you know the price of the material fluctuates frequently, and want to ensure materials get used at purchase price. Common stock materials are signposts, oil filters, or copper pipe. Non-stock materials are materials that are not kept on hand. They can still be used for applying a cost to a task, but Cartograph will not be able to tell you how much or how many you have left. In general, non-stock items are materials that aren't used daily. Reasons to create a material as a non-stock item are if the material comes in quantities that are approximated or difficult to measure accurately, or if you're using less expensive materials that generally come in large quantities. Common non-stock materials are rock, sand and salt, screws, bolts and nails, or engine oil. Let's create a non-stock material. Here on the material list view, you can see some common fields related to materials. There is a stock item field which allows us to see from the list view whether a material is stock or non-stock. Let's create a non-stock material, give it a vendor price quote, and look at material detail views. I'll go ahead and select Create. Now the process of creating materials is the same for stock and non-stock materials other than specifying the type of material. Here we'll set the ID to auto number. I'll put the description as non-stock piping. I'll leave other fields blank and I'll scroll down and unselect the stock item checkmark. By default, this checkmark is turned on, so we'll go ahead and undo that. The inventory method is set to FIFO by default, which is first in, first out, and we'll leave that set as default. I'll go ahead and finish and save. Now we're looking at the material detail view. The next thing that we'll want to do is create a vendor price quote for this non-stock material. I'll scroll down to the vendor price quote section and select Add. The vendor name will be ABC Supply. I'll put the quote in at $10 per feet, the effective on today, and I'll select the primary vendor. When we set a vendor price quote as primary vendor, the cost of using this material will automatically calculate when entering it on tasks. I'll go ahead and finish and save. Next, let's create a stock material. We'll look at the material detail view on that material, we'll stock in materials, and look at other actions for stock materials. I'll go ahead and select Create. Again, the fields are the same. I'll go ahead and leave the ID set to auto number. I'll set the description to stock piping. The manufacturer will be Roscoe. I'll set the default usage quantity to 5 feet. And I'll scroll down and leave the stock item checked. I'll set the maximum amount to be 100 feet. Minimum amount to be 2 feet. The reorder point to be 3 feet. And the reorder amount to be 50 feet. All of these fields are ways for the system to define specific actions. For example, the reorder point will trigger a notification when this material gets at or below that level of quantity on hand. The minimum amount is a way for me to tell the system I only want to have at minimum 2 feet on hand, maximum 100 feet, and then when I reorder, let's reorder 50. I'll set the initial usage date to today, and then I'll go ahead and finish and save. Now we're looking at the stock material detail view. In the header, we can see the description, manufacturer, that the material is a stock item. We can also see inventory information in the header. Let's do a stock transaction to add quantity for this material. I go to Actions and Stock. I'll set the date to today. Because my reorder amount is set to 50, it will default to put 50 feet in. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. I'll set the cost to $500. And the system will calculate the price per unit. If we did not know the total cost but did know the price per unit, we could also enter the price per unit and the system will calculate the total cost. I'll go ahead and save. Now that we have stocked in material, we can see the quantity on hand and the value of stock in the header. If we scroll down to the log section of the detail view, we can see a log record for the stock transaction we just did. There are 2 other types of actions we can do with a stock material: increase adjustment and decrease adjustment. Increase adjustments are used to increase the quantity on hand to update the system to match what is correctly in stock. Decrease adjustments are used to decrease the quantity on hand to update the system to match what is correctly in stock. So let's go ahead and assume that I meant to enter in 55 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and do an increase adjustment and increase 5 feet. I'll set the price per unit to be $10 again, and the cost will calculate. Now I'll go ahead and save, and now I have 55 feet on hand, and I have an increase adjustment and a stock transaction. Now let's go ahead and do a decrease adjustment to see how that affects the stock. So I'll do Actions, Decrease Adjustment. We'll decrease it by 12 feet. I don't have to put any cost values in here, and I'll go ahead and save. And now my cost has adjusted, and so has my quantity on hand. Now that we've created 2 different types of materials, let's look at vendors. I'll go back out to the Resources section and add a vendors layer. Vendors are the companies or individuals that provide services or inventory to your organization. You can store vendor contact information and price quotes in the system to make managing services and inventory more efficient. Vendor records have vendor price quotes, which help you track the cost of an inventory item at the time of purchase. As prices can vary over time, these fluctuations are tracked when capturing task costs. Let's create a vendor record and a vendor price quote. I'll go ahead and select Create, and here I can see the fields related to creating a vendor. I'll set the ID to the vendor name. I'll set that to Cartograph Shop. I'll set the address to 3600 Digital Drive. The city I will set to Dubuque. The state of Iowa, and the zip code 52003. Primary phone I will set to 877-647-3050, and the website is www.cartographshop.com. I'll scroll down and I'll set the established date to be 1/1/2000 and finish and save. Now we're looking at the vendor detail view. We can see in the header the address, city, phone number, and website along with contacts. Because this vendor is brand new, there's no contacts, so let's go ahead and create those. I'll scroll down to the contact section and select add. Name will be Jonathan Smith. Title of lead engineer. Phone number will be 800-675-9012. And the email address will be jsmith@cartographshop.com. I can add as many contacts as I have. Let's go ahead and add another one. Select add. This will be Angela Brown. Title of shop supervisor. Primary phone 800-675-9013. And an email of abrown@cartographshop.com. Again, I will finish and save. Now we can see that the contacts are listed in the header for the vendor detail view. Let's add vendor price quotes to record the materials we purchased from this vendor and the associated cost. I'll scroll down to price quotes and select add. I'll search for material C00104 and choose that material. I'll set a quote of $10 each with the effective on today. I will go ahead and select primary vendor. When we create a price quote as having the primary vendor box checked, then the quote's price is used for the material transactions to auto-populate the cost. Let's finish and save. Now we have entered a vendor price quote which is marked as primary vendor. We can use that price quote when we enter resources on the timesheet. Vendors also have a history and attached files section in their layout. The next part of our resources overview will be the timesheet overview. The timesheet is the location for entering labor, equipment, material, and other resource data for each task performed and view a task list. Tasks display on the timesheet for the signed-in user. If the task's status is in progress or planned, the task has an assigned labor entry associated to this user account, and the current date falls within the task actual start and actual stop dates. Let's look at how to enter resources on the timesheet. I'll move over to the Work tab. I'll go ahead and clear my task layers. I'm going to go ahead and put a filter on this task layer to see the tasks assigned to our laborer, Roy Smith. I have the assigned labor filter built in by default, so I'll utilize that. I'll go ahead and select it on and expand the arrow to edit the laborers whom I'm filtering by. Right now I'm filtering by Jennifer Smith, so I'll go ahead and clear that, and I'll search for Roy and select add. There are 3 tasks assigned to our laborer, Roy Smith. Let's hover over the task line and enter timesheets for this task. Using this icon, I can enter resources. The date defaults today, so we'll enter resources for today. If I wanted to choose a different date, I could select the date and choose from there. In the labor section, I'm going to go ahead and select add assignments. The rate will default to standard, so we'll go ahead and leave that as it is. And we'll set 7 hours for each assignment. In the equipment section, I'm going to search for C9001 and go ahead and add that. Again, the rate will default to standard. I'll put a usage of 7 hours. Under material, I'm going to search for the stock piping, which we just created in this tutorial. I'll go ahead and set the quantity to be 5 feet. I'll also go ahead and add the non-stock material that we created. Here I'll set the quantity to 5 feet as well, and you'll see the price per unit and cost will update. This is all based on the vendor price quote I created for the material. I'll scroll down to the other section and select add, And in the short description, I will enter future equipment scope rental. I'll select the vendor of future equipment. I'll set the usage to 7 hours and the cost to $200. The other section here can be used to record contractor or vendor costs or other miscellaneous costs that do not fit directly into labor, equipment, or material. Any costs recorded in other will be added to the task total cost. I'll go ahead and save my changes, close, and now let's open this task to view the task. Here we can see the cost that we just added via the Enter Resources calculate on the header. The last part of the resources overview will be to look at the Distribute Resources action. Distribute Resources allows users to quickly enter labor, equipment, material, and other resource entries for 2 or more tasks and have the hours, usage, and quantity distribute among the selected tasks. For each resource entered, the hours, usage, and quantity entered is divided by the total number of tasks as shown in the header. Other resource cost is divided by the total number of tasks. Distributed resource amounts round to 2 decimal points. To complete the Distribute Resource action, we'll go out to the Work tab. We'll turn our Assigned Labor filter off, and we'll add a simple filter to search for Activity is Inspect. I'll go ahead and select the top 4 activities, and I'll go ahead and do Actions, Distribute Resources. First, we'll add laborers. We'll add Roy Smith, and we'll say that he worked 10 hours between the 4 tasks, and you'll see that the hours per task is calculated to take 10 divided by the 4 tasks selected. Next, we'll add Jennifer, and also give her 10 hours. Next, under Equipment, we'll add C9002 and put a usage of 10 hours. The usage per task will also calculate for equipment. For material, let's go ahead and choose our stock piping material, which we created today, and we'll go ahead and set a quantity of 25 feet. Just like in the timesheet, there is an Other section in this layout. This can be used to record costs which do not fall into the labor, equipment, or material categories. For example, you can record contractor costs in the Other section. Any costs which are entered in the Other will be added to the task total cost value. Let's go ahead and add in a contractor cost with the vendor of Craftco, a usage of 10 hours, and a cost of $500. We'll see the usage and cost per task is then calculated. So here you can see on the right all of the ways that the Distribute Resources will break down the resources we enter per task. I can go ahead and save, and then I will get a message that says the resources were successfully distributed. I can say OK and close. We have now covered the basics of labor, equipment, materials, and vendors, timesheets, and Distribute Resources. We learned how to create each resource record and how they are associated to tasks. Labor allows you to track time spent by the people doing the work. You can assign tasks to laborers and see the work they've done on tasks within the system. Labor records contain contact information, rate information, logs, and history. Equipment allows you to track the tools used to complete work. Equipment tracks work done on the equipment, like oil changes, as well as the work the equipment is used for. The equipment record contains condition information, basic details, rate information, tasks and logs, and history, as well as attachments. Materials allow you to track the supplies used to complete tasks. Materials can be stock, where you track the inventory on hand, or non-stock. Materials are used on tasks and contain information regarding their costs, vendor price quotes, logs, history, and attachments. Vendors offer the functionality to track preferred vendors and the materials you purchase from them. Vendor records track contact information, basic details, vendor price quotes, history, and attachments for the vendor. Resource entry takes place on either the task timesheet or using the Distribute Resource tool. We looked at how to enter resources via the timesheet, as well as how to distribute resources to multiple tasks at once. Along with task functionality, resources allow users to fully track costs and rates within the system.